Hello, my name is Abbi Wonacott, and this is my TED Style Talk. For me, history is more than just words in a book. It's something more of action. To me, history is more like a hand. It reaches out and touches us from the past, it grabs a hold of us to teach us life lessons, and it pushes us to create an impact in our own time. If you don't believe me, ask Harriet. In this imagery, I look into her eyes, and I feel like she's saying, I know the way. I know all the tricks. I will get you to the promised land. I have a boat. And again, using that imagery where students can look into their eyes and lean in and create that sensory connection. That's why I love using imagery and artifacts. So as they look into this image of why the artist chose to do certain things, why the background, why the coloring, why is her hand stretched out, why does she have a boat? And again, those create other questions. How could a person go all the way back down to the South where she could possibly be enslaved again and lose all her freedom that she just fought so hard to gain, only to risk it all? What kind of person can do that, to go back to that suffering? I also like to use artifacts. I have some old cotton balls that were given to me by an older retired teacher, and they're actual cotton balls. So as kids are holding these, they can feel the 20 to 30 seeds in each cotton ball and feel how hard it was to tear apart those fibers just to create cotton fluff for manufacturing. And they can feel how tough it was, how they separate. And again, as they're sitting there touching those cotton balls, there again is another sensory connection they have to the past. History is also grabs a hold of us to teach us life lessons. Every year I like to teach about two amazing American generals. How one was our greatest traitor and the other became our greatest treasure. Both men were brave, both fought well, both were willing to give all for their country. And yet because of obstacles and insurmountable circumstances and not feeling appreciated, one would let all that bitterness come inside and internalize and grow to feel unappreciated and keep getting down with bitter and feeling, oh yeah, they don't care about me, they don't appreciate me, and would lead him to almost cost a great act of treason. While the other general had the same similar circumstances, but he chose instead of looking inward, he chose to look outward. He chose to see what the future of his country could be. He had a vision of what life could be like if he could just get past all these obstacles. So every year I teach about those two men, George Washington and Benedict Arnold. It also grabs a hold of us to teach us life lessons about people of our past. One year when I was teaching junior high, there was a student named Josh. He wasn't my student, but he was so troubled that all of us were worried about him. Even the students were coming to us with concerns about him. And even the counselors got his mother in. They tried to get other counseling. They begged her to get more help as his mother. And, it just was heading in a very terrible direction. So one morning I got word that Josh went home, walked past his little sister watching cartoons, took a shotgun, and ended his life in his mother's bedroom. It was horrible. It was like all our fears had come true. And the next morning, there's 30 faces looking at me, trying to make sense of it when I couldn't even make sense of it myself. And so then I remembered something. We were going through westward expansion, and that morning I was introducing the Oregon Trail. So I put a map of the Oregon Trail with all its ups and downs, and I explained to the students that the Oregon Trail could be a place of triumph and adventure and glorious sights and amazing experiences, but it could also be a place of dreadful death, of despair, of crushing sadness because of the deaths that were experienced along the way. But I told my students that there was something that those settlers knew that was very important. They knew that things never stay as bad as they are. They had the life experience to know that things will get better if you just keep moving on. And that's what those settlers did. One step at a time. They just kept moving. And I've never said Josh's name, but all those kids knew that's what I was talking about. And every year I try to remember that lesson when I teach about westward expansion. History also pushes us to create an impact in our own time. I often wonder what I would be like if I taught history as if I was a PE teacher. What would I do with it? And I think I question that. I wonder about that. And it really motivated me to teach skills. And one of those skills is voting. You don't just become a good voter because you turn 18. So I teach the skills of rhetoric, of propaganda, of marketing, of all those dirty tricks, including name calling. And I teach my students that you need to research and find credible sources, and that voting really comes down to, does your candidate agree with how to handle the issues the same way that you do? And find that closest match and vote for that person. I also feel like there's skill in how we make our projects, that they should have greater impact. One year, my students and I wanted to give them a good ending project as they were ninth graders heading off to high school. So we tried a lot of ideas and they didn't really think of anything. And finally, I told them this story about when I was younger than them, that my bus ride would go down the Michelle Prairie Road. And I heard many stories, and one of which was that there was something called the Michelle Massacre. And all I knew was that 2 old men killed women and children, and that men came up from Oregon to do it. And that's all I knew. So we set off this journey, but that's all we kept finding back was just that information. And so we were going to interview historians, talk to college professors, look online, and again, nothing. So then we started looking into doing our own research, finding our own way, and lo and behold, somewhere along the line, it stopped being a project, and it became a passion for a lot of my students. And we actually solved the mystery of the Michelle Massacre and wrote a book about it. And we were really on the right track to finding out what happened to those people on the Michelle River, those Nisqually Indian people. And the book has been used by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. It's been used in a report by the head of archaeology and history for a major university for the state of Washington. And just all those things came out of that those kids wanted to give voice to something that didn't have volume. They wanted to tell a story of an injustice. Later on, my students and I still wanted to tackle issues that really hadn't been covered or been given enough voice to create an impact. And just going back to that book, that actually created impact because Nisqually Indian people were very moved about how we got the story, how we respectfully handled it. And that led to another project about the Territorial Wars. We did a whole trifold exhibit about the Territorial Wars. And again, the kids were like moving past just a project. The whole idea was, what impact can they create with their project? What message could they portray? And so we had it at our school, and parents and students came, and it was really good, and they enjoyed it, and I was very proud of them. And we had some Indian elders that came. And they got a hold of us and said, hey, would you like to be involved in Indian Days at the Washington State Fair? And so we took our exhibit to the fair, and again, were surprised by the impact because Indian people were looking at it, seeing stories about their ancestors, looking at the kids going, you made this? You did this? And because they had so much passion and care about it. So they created that impact. And it still impacts them. I run into them years later and they still talk about it. And so each year we go to the fair and we do different types of topics. So creating that impact with your projects, giving a greater voice, going beyond an assignment and in a grade is that, desire that you want to have, that effect you want to have. So history is a hand. It reaches out and touches us, it moves us. And coming back to that, and also the idea that it grabs a hold of us, teaches life lessons, that when you hear about those stories like Harriet Tubman, it moves you to want to get involved. Like, you're not going to go through the woods avoiding dogs, trying to find moss on the right side of the tree to head north. But what are the issues in their time, and what can they do about it? How can they be involved in their school? That motivation, inspiration into action from what they've learned about history. So history is a hand. It reaches out and touches us from the past. It grabs a hold of us to teach us life lessons, and it pushes us to create an impact in our own time. So history is a hand. Let's do something with it.